Yo, what's up, people? It's your boy. I'm Chris the Don One, and I am back with another video. Okay, breaking news. I pretty much told you guys the trade involving Chris Paul going to the Rockets, and the Rockets are going to give the Clippers 3 players and a draft pick. And out of those players, Patrick Beverley looks like that's the player that they've been looking for. Now, Chris Paul, well, Patrick Beverley is going to be the piece that the Clippers can use as a replacement for Chris Paul. Now, a lot of people out there in the woodwork are trying to throw scenarios in on why this trade ultimately happened. Now, you have certain individuals from the New York Post as well as ESPN.com are reporting that after talking to people that are around Chris Paul and around the Clippers organization, they felt like Chris Paul was orchestrating this deal because he didn't no longer want to play for Doc Rivers. Now, he felt like, quote, Doc Rivers was basically showing favoritism towards his son. And people are noticing a recent trade that ultimately Doc Rivers didn't take up on. And that trade involved getting Carmelo Anthony to the Clippers. And the Clippers had to give the New York Knicks Doc Rivers, Jamal Crawford, and I believe a draft pick or another player. And the New York Knicks gave Doc Rivers 3 days to determine whether or not he wanted to accept this trade or not. Now, on paper, this is a great trade, okay? This is a great trade for the Clippers, and this is also a great trade for the New York Knicks. And I felt like if this deal would have been done, then, Phil Jackson would have probably stayed 1 more year, which he should have been fired 2 years ago, okay? And I think the Clippers would advance into the next stage into the playoffs, but I still don't feel like that was enough pieces to go up against the Golden State Warriors, okay? Definitely that's enough pieces for the San Antonio Spurs when you try to match them up. But as far as going up against the top dogs, the Golden State Warriors, I really don't see that even materializing. And you knew they had to add more pieces to combat the Golden State Warriors, okay? That was a great trade. And normally a GM, they would have took like maybe 3 seconds and said, okay, cool, let's do this, okay? We give you that, we get this, okay? But Doc Rivers waited a little bit longer until finally he got back to the New York Knicks after the 3-day deadline and said, okay, let's do this trade. Okay, it's a wrap. Let's do it. We'll give you this. You give us Carmelo Anthony. And the New York Knicks pulled that deal away. Okay, they was moving on to other things. And Chris Paul felt like that really played a part and a major factor in why he left the LA Clippers. He felt like Doc Rivers was showing mad favoritism to his son, and he put his family over the team. Okay? Now, a lot of people are denying this. Doc Rivers said this is not true. Even Doc Rivers' son said, if anything, he was more harder on me than Chris Paul, Blake Griffin, and DeAndre Jordan. Okay? So if anybody was having favoritism, it was those brothers, not necessarily me. Okay, now some people are also stating that in certain situations throughout the season, Doc Rivers really didn't go in or go hard on his son when his son would make a bad play or make a wrong decision. But when it came to the other players, he was very hard on them. Okay, now like I said earlier, Doc Rivers stated that this is not true. Chris Paul hasn't even confirmed nor denied this story, and I'm pretty sure later on today he's going to go into full details about this story. By the way, I don't think Chris Paul is ducking a fade. All right, And when you're talking about the other players, I'm pretty sure the other players are going to state for the record what actually went down. Okay, but here's my final opinion. If all of this is true, and the reason why you orchestrated this trade is because you just want to get out of LA Clippers, you felt like you didn't feel like the team wasn't going to take it to the next stage, but you felt like as long as Doc Rivers there, he's going to choose his family over the team. And that's the reason why you want to go to the Rockets. If all of this is true, just on that standpoint, then that's a weak move for Chris Paul. That is a gutless, weak move, okay? Now, people are going to hate, and they're going to comment on the comment section, but allow a brother to explain, all right? 2 years ago, DeAndre Jordan was a free agent, okay? And it took Doc Rivers, Chris Paul, and Blake Griffin to hold this man hostage to ultimately this man chose the LA Clippers. Now, if you're going to vouch for that brother and have a commitment with this brother, okay, showing that, hey, yo, we really do need you, and I'm going to show you so much support in this that when you sign on the dotted line, we're going to add more plays for you. That's showing leadership for Chris Paul. And that's also showing to DeAndre Jordan that you're committed. You're in the trenches with him. Okay? Now, I feel like if Chris Paul feels this way, then to me that's a weak move. Now, if he comes out and say that, well, no. The reason why I did this, because I just didn't see this team advancing or even getting better. Okay. Now, the Lob City experiment, maybe Chris Paul thought in the back of his mind, this is not working. Okay. Yeah, we look good. We look good on paper. We look good on the court with the flashy passes and the spectacular dunks. But then at the end of the day, this is not going to resonate for us to win a title or even beating the Golden State Warriors. Okay, so if Doc Rivers was truly showing favoritism to his son, then Chris Paul, you should have been more professional and as a leader be more vocal about this. Okay, I think a lot of these problems could have been solved by you being more vocal and going to Doc Rivers and Steve Ballmer. Steve Ballmer is a great owner for the Los Angeles Clippers, excuse me. And if Chris Paul really felt that way, then if you felt like you couldn't go to Doc Rivers to challenge him and say, hey, yo, me as well as the team feels like you're showing favoritism to your son, and we could have made this team a lot better by adding Carmelo Anthony, and you chose not to. Why take this route? And still, at the end of the day, you're showing signs of favoritism towards your son. And if Doc Rivers is man enough, and I'm pretty sure he is, he could have explained the situation, or explain the situation, or say, okay, well, if y'all feel this way, then I'm going to do my due diligence to make sure that this is not what you guys think reality is on my behalf. I'm really not showing favoritism to my son. I can understand why Doc Rivers, pretty much brought his son to the Clippers. He's trying to keep him under his wing to develop him not only as a player, but as a man in general. Because when Doc Rivers' son was drafted by the New Orleans Pelicans, or the New Orleans Hornets, I forgot what their name was when they signed Doc Rivers' son, he digressed. Okay, he never progressed. Okay, and that's the reason why Doc Rivers bought his son to the Clippers. Okay, but as a coach, Doc Rivers know that even though you're trying to do this with your son and try to integrate him into the roster, and somehow, some way, his talent contributes to the team, okay, even though this is a teaching moment here, this situation has to be beneficial for the rest of the members of the Clippers. Okay, you have a job to do. You are a coach and you also a GM. All right, so you had all these hats. You have to not only, if you want to do that, that's fine, but your ultimate goal is to make the Clippers better and to advance them. Okay, but like I said earlier, if Chris Paul felt this way, then Chris Paul should have went to Doc Rivers. And if Doc Rivers was not hearing it, then go to Steve Ballmer. I think Steve Ballmer is a fair enough individual where he would have went to Doc Rivers and they would have spoke and they would have either squashed this or resolved this by allowing Doc Rivers to walk. If Doc Rivers feels that strongly about his son, then Steve Ballmer has to make a decision as an owner. Like, look, I understand you're doing this for your son, but the ultimate goal is to make this team better. Okay, and if it means that you have to trade your son to get a better player or a better piece, then that's something we expect for you to do on a professional level. And that's only fair. At the end of the day, this is a business. I understand that's your son, and you want to show him guidance. You want to develop him just like any other player under your wing. You develop those players. But at the end of the day, this is about a business. This is about winning a championship. And I feel like Chris Paul feels that if they would have went for that deal, getting Carmelo Anthony to the Clippers, and Doc Rivers' son, as well as some other pieces, I think Jamal Crawford, they go to the Knicks, then the other stuff that been transpiring for the past 48 hours, 72 hours, I don't think none of that stuff would have happened. Phil Jackson would have still kept his job with the New York Knicks, okay? And they would have gotten rid of Carmelo Anthony's contract, and they would have at least granted Phil Jackson one more year, because after all, he drafted a player to fit in this triangle. And to me, when he did that, that made me think in the back of my mind that, okay, well, they feel confident about Phil Jackson, even though the moves that he's doing is not translating on the court. All right. But at the end of the day, I felt like if you would have went through with this trade, everything would have been status quo. Okay. Chris Paul would have stayed with the Clippers. Okay. I'm not too sure about Blake Griffin. They probably will re-sign Blake Griffin and then trade him later on, or do a three-way trade or a trade in general to get more added pieces for the Clippers, because they definitely need more pieces. Even if they would have signed Chris Paul and Blake Griffin, that's still not enough, okay? And Phil Jackson would have never gotten fired or would have left, depending on who you talk to. There's people out there saying that Phil Jackson basically turned in his resignation, and then there's other reports out there saying, no, Phil Jackson has been fired, okay? But I don't think none of that stuff would have translated if that deal would have happened back in January. And if you guys remember when I uploaded my video and I told you guys the trade scenario, this particular trade, at the end of the day, that would have been a good trade for both parties, the Clippers as well as the New York Knicks, because now the New York Knicks can finally rebuild and start this all over again. And with the pieces that the Clippers was going to give the Knicks, they could have seen how these pieces would have fit with their team, or B, this summer trade those picks. Trade those certain players away, those assets away, and get draft picks and just rebuild it. They'll be in rebuilding mode next year. Okay, that would have saved Phil Jackson's job. Carmelo Anthony would have been off the books of the New York Knicks, and now Carmelo Anthony is a problem with the Clippers. Okay, you would have kept Chris Paul. Chris Paul would have re-signed. Okay, I got Carmelo Anthony. We still need to add more pieces, and I still felt like the Clippers could have advanced to another phase in the playoffs. And attempt to go to another phase into the playoffs. And I think that would have been good enough for Chris Paul. Chris Paul would have said, okay, we got Carmelo Anthony, we got our score. All we have to do is sign J.J. Redick. That's another scorer. That's another shooter. Resign myself, or just take a 1-year extension and then see how this plays out next year, and then go back to the table and either sign an extension or just walk away from the Clippers. And then this ridiculous statement that a lot of people are speculating that at the end of next season, Chris Paul going to be a free agent, LeBron James going to be a free agent, Dwayne Wade, I think he's going to be a free agent. The Banana Boat brothers, they can finally play together in the summer of 2018. I'm not even going to talk about. Well, I'll talk about that a little bit later. But at the end of the day, you understand what I'm saying? I feel like if this deal would have went down in January, then none of the other stuff that happened today would have never happened. Phil Jackson would still be president of operations of the New York Knicks. James Dolan would have said, quote, let's give him 1 more year. He made a good trade. He cleared the salary of Carmelo Anthony. Let's see where this goes from here. And then the Clippers would have had Carmelo Anthony. And then Chris Paul would have said, you know what? We have, thanks for the thumbs up, guys. We have Carmelo Anthony. Let me see what this goes to the next phase. Okay, so I feel like if this trade would have happened, this definitely would have been very beneficial for the Clippers and the New York Knicks. Now, what this means for the summer of 2018, okay, I think Chris Paul is going to view this year as an experiment to see if he can coincide with James Harden, see how this works. Because like I said in yesterday's video, Chris Paul is a traditional point guard, okay? He's the prime example of an Isaiah Thomas, okay? And James Harden, who should have played the 2, he was playing the point this year. Now he goes back to the 2. Now, a subscriber got on to me, and when I found out last summer that Mike D'Antoni was going to experiment and put James Harden at the 1, I stated, quote, that was a ridiculous ideal, okay? I just didn't see how this was going to work in the stretch run. Now, I was sort of wrong about that analogy, but at the end of the day, when you go into the playoffs, that opinion was proven, that when James Harden played the point, he had a hard time to get the other players around him in better situations and use the things that they do on an ultimate level to make those guys improve, so maybe they can advance into the playoffs. Okay, so now you have Chris Paul. Chris Paul is a traditional point guard. They're going to still have this notion of pushing the ball up the court quicker, because that's how Mike D'Antoni runs his system. Let's push the ball as fast as we can, score fast as we can, play a little defense. Hopefully they miss the shot and push it back up again. This is a pushing type of offense, okay? I think Chris Paul, since he's a traditional point guard, he can really flourish in this type of offensive scenario versus remember a couple of videos back, I was telling you guys the trade speculations about Chris Paul going to the San Antonio Spurs, and I felt like that situation wouldn't necessarily work for Chris Paul with the San Antonio Spurs, and once again I was proven right again, okay? But if you look at it, Chris Paul, really, his style really doesn't fit well with the San Antonio Spurs. Yes, he can push the ball up the court. Yes, he can set the play up. But ultimately, the San Antonio Spurs, what they do good is throwing the ball around to the most open player. Okay, and 9 times out of 10, player, I mean, when you look at your opponent, defensive wise, they're going to look at that situation, that particular scenario, and go, okay, then if they want to play this way, then we'll tighten the D on the other players at large that can shoot the ball, and then we can play kind of loosely on Chris Paul. Allow Chris Paul to just be a scorer, okay? The best things about Chris Paul is getting people in the right situation, making other players better, okay? Chris Paul is really not a traditional scorer, okay? He can score, but he's not a traditional scorer, okay? So if you twist the style around and let Chris Paul be a traditional scorer instead of what he's very good at is making other players better, then that would not been very beneficial for Chris Paul or the San Antonio Spurs, okay? Now, with Chris Paul with the Houston Rockets, his style is to make other players better. He's going to make James Harden better. He's going to make the other players on that roster better, okay? And it's offense that's built to where we're going to push this ball up the court and we're going to score as fast as we can, and then they're going to get the ball, and then we're going to play a little defense, not a lot of defense, a little defense, and we're going to hope and pray that either our defense stop them or they miss the shot and we can push the ball back up the court. So I think this is a win-win situation, a win-win scenario for Chris Paul, as well as the Clippers and Mike D'Antoni. Now James Harden can play the two. And this year, like I said, this is an experimental year for Chris Paul, because at the end of this NBA season, 2018, the summer of 2018, that's when he becomes a free agent. LeBron James becomes a free agent. And there's already discussion that if the Clippers let go of Doc Rivers, then and if Steve Ballmer signs the right coach that can attract not only Chris Paul coming back, but also maybe LeBron James and Dwayne Wade, the Banana Boat brothers, they can probably take their talents to the Clippers. I really don't see them. I really don't see the Banana Boat brothers going to the Houston Rockets. Okay, I don't think that's a good look for the Houston Rockets, and that's really not a good look for maybe Dwayne Wade, because James Harden is still there. But as far as LeBron James go and Chris Paul go, that may be an attractive piece for those two brothers. But if this banana boat scenario is going to play out, it's going to have to play out with another team. Maybe the Lakers, maybe the Clippers, or maybe with Cleveland. You know, I don't know. But as far as the banana boat situation, I think that's a pipe dream. I do really feel like LeBron James wants to play with his buddies and all that. One last hurrah, sort of say, before he call it a wrap for his NBA career. But as far as this banana boat angle, I really just don't see that, you know, really happening. Okay, I think that's something that Chris Paul wants. That's entertaining Chris Paul. That's entertaining LeBron James, Carmelo Anthony, Dwayne Wade. But at the end of the day, I don't think this is really going to transpire or work out for either of those players. But once again, Doc Rivers explained in a nutshell that he was not showing favoritism to his son, though he do feel and understand why people think that perspective. And his son even got on social media and explained the situation. And when you're looking at it from their standpoint, you understand where they're going, you know, why they're doing this. They're doing this because it's either one or two things. Either it's totally not true or they're deflecting, okay? And either way, if that trade would have went down involving his son and they would have gotten Carmelo Anthony, I think everything would have probably stayed status quo. Phil Jackson would still be with the Knicks. Chris Paul would probably resign with the Clippers or sign to that 1-year deal to see how it plays off another year with Carmelo Anthony, and then life would have been moved on. I mean, life would have been different than what it is today, okay? But guys, tell me what you think. Rate, comment, subscribe, notification gang in the building. Hit that notification icon, that notification bell, so it'll let you know when my next video or live stream goes down. I'm gonna probably do a lot more of these. The sun is in my eye. I can barely see you guys. I'm probably gonna do my video set up this way. It's a lot cheaper. Not cheaper, it's a lot easier. I don't have to record it and then go into the lab and mix this shit out. I can just, you know, do a live stream, bam, hit finish, and then I'm done. I can go, you know, I can go do something else. But guys, tell me what you think. That was just too much information. Rate, comment, subscribe. It's your boy. I'm Chris the Dom One, and I am you.